Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We realize it's Sunday, and it's usually nap time after digesting a nice Sunday lunch. So let me start with what I call, staying in the food analogy, my alphabet soup of regulations. I guess there's some on here you're familiar with. I think we all know now about DPP, ESPR. Some we still need to think about, EUDR, Waste Framework Directive. And sometimes I actually still need to check because I always get confused between SB 253 and SB 261. What we've been noticing over the past months and year or so is the multiplication of various regulations. So trying to remember the acronyms is one thing, trying to understand what they're all about is yet another. And it's interesting because some of them are more specific to the textile industry, but at the same time, you've got an array of new regulations that are going to be applicable to all types of companies in whatever industry. So we are going to be faced, be it outdoor or fashion, with a multiplication of various types of regulations at the same time. And they're all covering different things. And very different in terms of topics. It can be deforestation, it can be waste, it can be eco-design requirements, and in nature too. So for instance, some will pertain to actually how you can access the market based on certain specific sustainability specifications, and others are more looking into reporting. So some pertain to your products, some pertain to your company. And it's a bit of like a cobweb of various topics and approaches to sustainability that are all mixed up. So this is pretty confusing. And we've talked a lot, even this morning, about EU regulations, but it's not just an EU question at the moment, it's global. So we have a DPP in China, there is a CSRD, we've got reporting regulations in other countries through stock exchanges, etc., etc. So the way I usually see it is the sooner you work on these questions, the better. And it's also trying to find the minimum common denominator between all these regulations across countries and across borders. I think that on top of the geographical spread of these new laws that are going to come up and that actually some are already implemented, is the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty around them. I think we all have in mind maybe the omnibus that seems to be changing every day, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 1 step forward. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the regulatory situation, but also in terms of the political situations. The other challenging aspect is that these laws, and I'm talking about geographical spread, go beyond your usual sphere of control as an entity. You need to look upstream, you need to look downstream, and control things that are out of your usual sphere of influence, which makes it quite complex. And it's not only about regulators, there's many other stakeholders who are there requesting you for information, performance, sustainability. So we know some of them. Obviously, NGOs want you to be more transparent on certain topics, but you've also got the financial industry. When you're asking for credits, maybe they'll ask for your sustainability performance to offer you better rates. We've got investors too, and actually investors are quite interesting because they've been asking about sustainability for many, many years into many more details than the actual regulations. So there's this array of pressure on companies and brands at the moment, and my question is, actually, how do you manage? How do brands keep on top of all these regulatory changes and trying to do the right thing? Well, we've been working with brands for many years, and it's true that over the past month or year or so, we've noticed they've been facing the following challenges from a corporate perspective, but also from product development perspective. I would say one of the main things we've noticed is and it's pretty common, the lack of visibility of the supply chain. Tier 1, we know. Beyond, it gets a bit complicated. Who are your Tier 2 suppliers? From what facilities do your materials come from? How sustainable are they? Do you know what's going on in each of these facilities? Do you know how much volume you purchase from them? So this is one of the biggest challenges in terms of traceability, really understanding what you're purchasing from where and what inputs are used where. The other one, and I'm putting it in the context of regulation and thinking a bit about reporting, is that often when you need the data, you realize that it's scattered. You may have suppliers covered by certain reporting platforms or regulations, others by complete different ones, or even different certification schemes. How do you bring it all together? How do you aggregate it when even methodological alignment is not there? There's been examples, maybe you've seen in the press lately, about two key standard providers, which are ISO and the GHG protocol, who are starting only now to work together on climate standards. So this is an issue. And often we hear that there's this reporting fatigue. And reporting fatigue, not only on the parts of brands, but also on the parts of your supply chain partners, who get asked often the same questions with a bit of variance here and there. I think another one is about transparency and some of the fear of disclosing information. So we understand that sometimes for competitive reasons, we don't want to share too much information about what's going on in our supply chain. However, we know also that being more transparent builds trust, hence the importance of it. But I will keep the best for the end, which is chemical management. We're noticing more and more that brands are struggling in putting together a clear chemical management program, sharing it with their suppliers, making sure they meet their expectations. There's also, I mean, let's face it, a bit of fear around a complex and not very sexy topic. So I will leave it to my colleague, Daniel Waterkamp, our head of academy and chemical expert, to bring you through the latest legislation and what it will entail in terms of chemical management. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Esther. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Daniel Waterkamp. Louder? Okay. Yeah, we want to talk about substances of concern. And this is not an easy topic. As soon as we start about chemicals, there's always a lot of question marks, especially for the non-chemical experts. And yeah, we have been talking a lot with stakeholders in the industry, in the textile supply chain, with a lot of system partners, and there's thousands of question marks. And that's the reason why we chose to present this topic. What the heck are substances of concern? And there is, and the big worrying things for a lot of companies being involved in the textile supply chain are actually the obligations imposed by the European Union. Actually, this term, substances of concern, was defined by the European Union. And I will explain now in the first step, what are those substances? So you can see here in the middle, there's this big bubble, which is the container of substances of concern. It's a big container. And there's 4 buckets feeding into this container of substances of concern. And you can see here at the left top part, there's the persistent organic pollutants. And there is a regulation, an E-regulation behind that. It's called the POPs regulation. Examples here are PFAS, certain flame retardants. It's a pretty old thing, actually. Another old thing are the substances of very high concern. It's the second bucket, and that is linked to a chemicals regulation called REACH. Probably a lot of you have heard or not heard about it, but REACH is the big chemicals regulation of the European Union. And the bucket of substances of very high concern are feeding also in the big container of substances of concern, and examples are here APEOs, like a certain class of detergents that are not good for the environment, also PFAS again, and, for example, cyclic siloxanes that may occur in silicones, right? And now we come to the most interesting bucket, which is the third one. And that feeds thousands of additional substances into this container of substance of concern. And those are all the substances that may have or are proven to have concerning and chronic health and environmental hazards, such as mutagenicity, carcinogenicity, sensitizing property for the respiratory system, and so on. And there's a few more, right? Also aquatic toxicity, chronic aquatic toxicity. So this is a huge group of substances that are now also on the list. And the fourth bucket are substances that could hinder the recycling process. And that's a bit of a shady thing yet. We don't know exactly what those substances are. And very important, they are not linked to any hazardous property. It's really substances that may make the recycling process, if you recycle polyester, a problem. Yeah. So this is the definition of substance of concern. And we talk about 4,600 substances that are in the focus right now. It's a lot. The European Union is defining currently, and has defined and are still defining, reporting or information requirements on product level and on company level. So those are the ones on product level that you can see here. And there's always a legal foundation to information duty or reporting obligation. And the legal foundation here, in this case, for product level reporting or information, is the ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation. Those regulatory frame or paragraphs, let's say, define parameters that make a product sustainable, design criteria for sustainable products. And it's important to know it's not a nice to have. You need to comply to have access, to maintain access, or to get access to the European market. And substances of concern is one of the priority parameters here. Okay? So this is a legal framework, and a legal framework is always connected to an information tool. And the information tool, this is referenced in the ESPR, is the so-called DPP. I think everybody has heard about the DPP meanwhile. It's the Digital Product Passport. And in the Digital Product Passport, actually you are obliged to disclose certain sustainability parameters, such as the content of substances of concern. So that is for the product. Let's go for the company. Company requirements, reporting requirements, or the obligations are laid down in another piece of legislation, which is called, which you could find in the alphabetic sustainability soup presented by Esther, is the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And here it's described how and what companies need to report if to document their progress in sustainability in the areas environment, social, and governance. And one element here, under the pillar environment, is the reporting on substances of concern / substances of very high concern. How to report then? There is a link between the legal foundation and the guidance how to report. The link is made to the ESRS, which is the European Sustainability Reporting Standard. Yeah. So here it's described that in the area of environment, in the topic environment, you also need to report on substance of concern that is used on a company level. For example, in your supply chain, a brand supply chain, textile manufacturers may report on it, and also chemical suppliers. So now the big question, so how can we solve it? How can we provide a solution? And of course, we are thinking about it, and we are currently developing, we're quite far, we are currently developing a solution because our our core business at bluesign is all starts with the chemicals. So within our chemical assessment, you know, we have a chemical products, you have a lot of substances that feed into a chemical product. And with this information, we can easily define or identify what are the substances of concern in a chemical product. Okay? And once we have identified those, we can tag them, because all those products that we certify and assess, which carry then the bluesign, the label bluesign approved, are feeding into a chemicals inventory list of a manufacturing plant. Yeah, for example, a textile manufacturers with dyes, with pre-treatment agents, and so on. So we can tag them in the chemical inventory list, all those substances of concern, and then also quantify them, because we know the consumption of all those chemicals. So that means we know how much is entering, how much chemistry, how many substances of concern are entering the factory. And we can push this information to the brand's impact report or the manufacturer's impact report. So it's measurable. The second phase is a bit more difficult. So now we know with the first phase of the solution how much substance of concern are brought into the factory. But the most interesting question is then what happens after? Where do they go to? Yeah. And depending on the chemistry, you have pre-treatment chemicals that go mostly to the wastewater. Then you have effect-giving chemicals that end up on the fabric. And then you have certain chemicals that go into the air. And the mass balance here, it's a bit more complex, but it's very important to know how much is actually ending up in the article, in the material, and ultimately in the consumer product, which is composed of many articles or components, right? So this is very valuable and needed information further down the line to be fed into the digital product passport. Yeah, that's basically a little deep dive into the topic substances of concern. I would like to hand over to my dear colleague,
Thanks,
Esther,
Daniel.
again.
Thanks for making it understandable, digestible, and also to helping us in showcasing that there are solutions out there as to how to tackle this question. I think when we look at the current regulation, and we've seen it with what Daniel has presented just before, there are three key aspects that will help you out along the way. And this is traceability, disclosure, and performance. Traceability, know your supply chain. Know beyond tier one. Ask for the data. Ask for what's happening at facility level. Ask about sustainability credentials. That's key. Other aspect, disclosure. Be transparent. It's always we always fear that we may be disclosing too much information to consumers, to other types of stakeholders. The reason why it's so important is that if you don't disclose it, some others may make assumptions about your performance. So be transparent. That will enhance your credibility. And I think the last but not least is performance. Ask your suppliers for the data. Work on primary, robust data. That's key. You understand where you are and where you want to go and where you are along the way. And the reason why it's so important that you own that data and that you set where you want to go in terms of performance is that if you don't do it, someone else will do it for you based on assumptions. Some of the current regulation will allow third parties to calculate the sustainability performance of products. So better it be in your hand, you have the data, you drive the change. So why are we talking about beyond compliances? We believe that by tackling legislation with this three-pillar approach, regulation is actually an opportunity for a sound business, for more sustainable products, for consumer trust, and obviously it's better for the environment and the people. Why are we, bluesign, today on stage to discuss that? Because actually that's what we've been doing for the past 25 years with our system partners, helping on the chemical side and on the impact side, be it for climate or water, in improving your performance, your sustainability performance beyond compliance. We believe it's it's an opportunity, the current regulation, to go even further and having a more resilient business, but also more sustainable products. On this note, I'd like to thank you and open up for questions to Daniel or myself. While I'll wait for you to think about a few questions, I'll probably start by asking one, unless anyone wants to go before me. No? Please do.
I enjoyed that presentation because it makes sense. I'm asking an impossible question. This is what we know is coming in now. At 10 o'clock this morning, Pascal was talking about the future.
Correct.
How many hints do we have for what is coming in for the future? I know we have a simplified version of some areas, and I know the consensus is that that is garbage. Am I allowed to say garbage publicly?
Yes.
So what roadblocks are we going to have, in other words?
Difficult questions, because it seems to be changing by the hour. I mean, my genuine question is that we shouldn't wait for regulation to tackle these issues, to be very honest. I think, and we saw that in the panel this morning, these regulations will be enforced in the next 2 to 3 years, will be made mandatory for brands and manufacturers in the next 2 to 3 years. But actually, we're working now on the 2028, 2029 collections. So if we don't start soon, even while legislation is not quite there yet, we're going to miss the boat. So my suggestion would be don't wait for regulation. Start as soon as possible. We may not have the minute final details, but we know the sense of direction, and now's the time. Any other questions? I have one for you, Daniel.
Good.
We were talking about substances of concern, but obviously these are not new substances. So why all the hype around this terminology?
Yeah. So rightly said, so substances are mostly not new. They are known for a long time. But I would say the European Union has come up with a new definition, the wider range of substances that should be tracked. And now it's we started to take care of them, right? They were a bit under the radar, and now we are tackling them. It's nothing new, but I think they and we, especially as bluesign, that has always been our mission, we just start to be more, make it more aware and give the right tools to just be a bit more ambitious as before. You know, regulations and also sustainability has been evolving over the past decades very heavily, and I think it totally makes sense to continue here. And the good thing is, so you have seen the big bucket of substances of concern. A lot of them are anyway already covered within the bluesign system. Yeah? And adding to your question, so why waiting for regulations to kick in if you have a solution already now, right? So basically, that's what we are offering. The added value that we try to offer, that we want to offer to our clients, is exactly to be prepared before regulations kicked in. And then those companies have an advantage. They don't need to worry anymore. They're already there, already prepared for something that is going to come further down the road in a few years.
Thank you. Any other question from the public? Yes.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. You were mentioning that one of the challenges right now is the reluctance of companies to share the information. So how do you ensure that facilities across different tiers share the right data on the chemicals also, since more and more are added? So how do you ensure this stable flow of data that you can collect?
Thanks for the question. I'll probably answer on the non-chemical data, and I'll let it to you for the chemical side of things. So at bluesign, we work with our system partners, and every year they share with us their environmental impact data. So it can be raw data that we then calculate with our methodologies and get the CO2 footprint or other data that are needed for two things, either because you need performance data and primary verified data to set targets, to have a sense of direction, to understand how your supply chain is performing, or because you need it for disclosures. And we believe that by having this direct data from manufacturers on a yearly basis, and the fact that it's primary is key for decision making and moving the needle in the right direction. So on top of that, manufacturers also report on their chemicals every year. So maybe I'll let that part to you.
Yeah, it starts with the chemical manufacturers, and that's integral part of the bluesign system, right? The transparency, if you want to be a bluesign system partner, that's your part of obligation that you need to deliver to be adhering to our standard. That's just our system, how it's built. Transparency is built into our system. And it starts with the chemicals. So we know the chemical composition, we can tag, taking the example of substances of concern, we can tag them and carry this information through the supply chain. And that's how the system is built.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Let a few extra seconds. Okay, thanks. Well, if you have any more questions, we're just on the booth behind, so happy to welcome you there and further discuss substances of concern or any other environmental impact and data. Happy to help out. Thanks, Daniel, and thanks to you all for your participation this afternoon.
Thanks, Esther.
Thanks.